Chapter 26. Curing the Aftermath of 40 Years of Repression. What innumerable images, ideas, impulses, thoughts, and feelings are pressed back and hidden in the subconsciousness of every person's mind. I remember slipping off a little rowboat pier at a Michigan summer resort about 20 years ago. To the conscious mind, it was but 30 or 40 seconds from the time my head went under the water till it bobbed up again and I was helped into one of the rowboats tied to the pier. But subconsciously I lived years. I saw the snow peaks of the Himalayas, a jungle army of African gorillas, a garden of roses in Rome. I worked out the chapters of a book on a new philosophy of life. I felt passion previously unknown to me. I heard people gibbering and saw 20 or more boxcars filled with dirty linen. I conceived a new play, planned to build a pyramid, and even saw the headlines of a newspaper announcing my death, in the presence of 40,000 people, when in reality there were only 8 people on the pier. Every suppression is a possible cause of an ill or failure of some kind or another, even though the conscious mind does not know that such suppression exists or that such cause is operating. To one ill of the wild animal, man has 10,000 diseases. The animal's subconscious is hourly expressed, but man's subconscious is habitually suppressed. So long as the cause is hidden in the subconsciousness, the conscious mind often fails to heal. It succeeds only when it happens to hit the nail on the head. Let me illustrate the value of a study of hidden causes by a particular case. 21 months ago, a man 56 years of age came to me. His heart palpitated so badly that his physician feared for his life week by week. He was subject also to periods of great despondency and to fits of violent temper. These had grown worse for 20 years or more. He had been a poor boy and was now wealthy. He had faith in prayer, mental healing, and Christian Science. First, he had been treated by physicians. He had tried change of scene and had been hypnotized, and for years he had relied upon mental treatment to cure him. Yet he had not been healed. As he told me the story of the sincere and earnest efforts of others to help him, I became certain that there was some cause hidden in the subconscious mind that was at the bottom of all his trouble. But his conscious mind could remember nothing that seemed to be of sufficient importance to cause so persistent a condition. The process is this: discover the hidden cause in the subconscious mind, interpret it, and thus give the conscious mind a chance to idealize it and express it in normal action. To return to our case, an analysis of the subconscious showed that the man preferred yellow, violet, and old rose to other colors. He preferred opera to any other form of entertainment. In drama, he liked the villain best, but in opera the hero. Of different voices, he liked the bass best, and of music that of the pipe organ. In writing, 900 words, anything that came into his mind beginning with the word match, he wrote smooth 27 times, harmony 42 times, heaven 37 times, flowing 11, sound 28, organ 53, father 41, hell 36, concert 42, and opera 28. Space limits me as to detail, but this is what I discovered. As a young boy, his greatest desire was to play the organ. The next strongest desire was to listen to organ music. He often went to a Catholic church to hear the organ music. But his father was a Baptist and thrashed the boy every time he found out that the boy had been to the Catholic church. Music aroused limitless feeling that demanded expression. But because of his father, these were always suppressed by fear. Consequently, as means of curing him, instead of concentration on calmness and peace and control, as had been done in the previous treatments, I chose courage and harmony in action. This last was put into practice. The man learned to play a pipe organ. Within 30 days he was cured. In 18 months that have since passed, he has never had an attack of blues or fit of temper, and his heart beats as normally as my own. God is all knowledge, hidden and revealed. Your subconscious mind is infinite, with the infinity of God. Out of it is all ideas, impulses, and feelings you need to know will come to you. There is nothing hidden that shall not be revealed. Chapter 27. Preventing Mistakes in Thinking. If you know how to prevent your mind making mistakes, that knowledge and the use of it will aid you in your advancement, stop failures in business, prevent fiction in social life, stop the offending and losing of friends, and help very greatly in making you happier. Happiness is the goal of the soul. It is the end of human endeavor, the purpose of living and loving and serving. How we have suffered because of the unintentional mistakes we have made. how we have made others suffer, how others have made us suffer. And not because of our intention or their intention, but because we did not know how to idealize the process of preventing mistakes. It is completeness that makes thought ideal, that makes it right, that makes it godlike. God is God because he is complete, the perfect, the all-in-all. We make mistakes only when our thought is incomplete, that is, when it is not idealized. There are two factors in the process of thinking. 1, recognizing likeness, and 2, discriminating differences. If you idealize the process of thinking, you complete it. You use both of these. If you do not idealize the process, you use but one, or you use one almost to the exclusion of the other, and it is then that you make the mistakes that bring unhappiness. A baby boy reared in the tropics was brought to New York when 3 years old. That winter, as he looked out the window of the first snow he had ever seen, he clapped his hands in glee and said, "Oh, Mama, look at all the sugar." He recognized the likeness in appearance of snow and sugar, its whiteness, and he made the mistake because he had no opportunity of distinguishing the difference. A little girl, now a noted woman, was born in inland Peru in the nitrate section desert, an absolutely barren land where no vegetation could live. She had never seen grass, she had never seen a tree. When 10 years old, she was taken by a ship to Santiago and driven in a closed carriage through the city to the home of her grandfather. Out in the yard, a few hours later, she saw a great tree. A breeze sprang up, the leaves rustled, the branches moved. In terror, she picked up a stone to defend herself. To her, the tree was some gigantic animal making ready to attack her. She had never known a vegetable form of life that moved, for she had seen vegetables only in sacks and cans. But animals moved, and since this tree moved, she judged it to be an animal. The mistake was based on the recognition of a likeness. Animals move. This big thing moves, therefore it must be an animal. Let me repeat. Unintentional mistakes are caused by recognition of likeness with insufficient discrimination of differences. Another case. Husband and wife and 2 young sons. The man has worked earnestly and efficiently, and his wife has helped. They are in comfortable circumstance. One son is in high school, the other in college. Oil is discovered in California west of the Coast Mountain Range. The wells are gushing thousands of dollars worth of oil per day. The husband visits the desert land east of the mountain range, and accidentally, in the crevice of a gully, he finds soaked chunks of earth that are oily. He feels it. He feels oily. He looks at it. It looks oily. It feels and looks like the oil-soaked chunk of earth found in the oil region west of the mountains. In his mind, he sees oil gushers in this region like west of the mountain. In his imagination, he sees himself many times a millionaire like the men who discovered oil west of the mountains. As many know he is on this trip, he does not confide his discovery to others. So he says nothing, but invests all his savings in this desert land. At the bank, he borrows all he can borrow to secure additional options. To this point, all his thought and action is based upon recognition of likeness. Then the expert finds a difference. It looks like oil, but it is not oil. It feels greasy, just as petroleum feels greasy, but it is not petroleum. It has no value. It is so easy to see only likeness. It is the lowest type of mind action. It is incomplete. It leads to mistakes. It brings unhappiness, so much unhappiness. To prevent mistakes in individual life, in home life and business, in industrial and in national affairs, idealize the process of recognizing differences. Idealize your thoughts and your plans of action. Whatever you are to do, idealize the process. Sit quietly. Vision the likeness. Do not admit them, but idealize the differences also. Idealize a difference again and again to be certain you include all of them. Only the idealized process produces the ideal result, happiness. Chapter 28. Overcoming forgetfulness, idealizing remembering. What a lot of personal, family, social, and business troubles, yes, even tragedies, result from forgetfulness. You and everyone desire to change this mental habit of often and easily forgetting to a habit of remembering easily and readily. Such a habit of good memory cannot be attained by using the clownish mental gymnastics that are called memory systems. Waste no time on these substitutes for memory. Many of their methods are ridiculous in nature and complex in operation. For instance, if you wish to remember who was the 14th president of our country, you are instructed to think of the initials of these 2 words, F and P, and then to remember it was Franklin Pierce. but F and P might also stand for filthy pig. Such a memory relationship would be of no value at all unless you had previously remembered that 1, that Franklin Pierce was the 14th president, and 2, that the initials of Franklin Pierce are F and P, and 3, that the initials of the 14th president are F and P, 4, that the initials of the Franklin Pierce and the 14th president are the same, and 5, that F and P must not be remembered as initials of filthy pig, funny pictures, false policies, fatty Peters, fancy poultry, and 6, some 10,000 or more other possibilities of such initials. To remember by using memory system requires about 10 times the energy and mind effort required to memory itself. It is when you have not remembered that the mind makes effort. When you have remembered to do what you intended to do, the act of remembering was easy. Why? Because your mind then used its own process of remembering. If you idealize this process, you make it perfect, a habit of remembering easily. What is the process of idealizing memory? What is the mental act of idealizing the process? Let me make a confession. In my psychology, I wrote of this development of memory at least 20 years ago. I have used it much. I have never known it to fail when used. That is the point, when used. A few months ago, after returning from Mexico in the South, I had no residence ready for me, and for a few weeks took a place with which I was entirely unfamiliar, a place that was very inconvenient, and that it was necessary to keep certain manuscripts in the basement. The electric light in the basement was turned on by a button switch at the top of the stairs. I do not like to waste anything, yet for 2 weeks, over and over again, when I started for the basement, I would find the light was already on. This meant that over and over again, after getting the important thing I wanted, I had forgotten to turn out the lights after I came up. I thought about this. I reminded myself again and again not to forget to turn out the lights. But the mind being occupied with things which I considered very much more important, I continued again and again to forget. This is the point. Mere thinking to remember will not develop memory nor make you remember. A mere idea that you must remember something often leads to forgetfulness, no matter how good the intention to remember. One day, like a flash, it came to me that I had been very remiss in not putting my own ideals into practice. The very things I had written 20 years ago, the very thing I had practiced for 20 years whenever important things were to be remembered. What I did illustrates the idealizing process. What you forget to do is not a material thing, but the process in your mind that you intend to do certain things at a certain time. If you idealize this process, you build into it the structure so that it works automatically. This was the actual process I wished to attain. I wished to be able automatically to go to the stairs, even while my mind was centered upon getting important papers from the basement, turn on the lights, go down, get the papers, return, and automatically switch off the light. As stated, I had previously thought of doing so. I had had an idea of doing so a score of times and had reproached myself for forgetting to do so. It took 2 minutes to idealize this process. I closed my eyes to shut out all other images. I first saw and then felt myself move, approaching the door leading to the basement. I saw and felt myself move in turning on the light, descending the stairs, getting the file of papers, mounting the stairs, turning off the lights, and going about my work. Immediately, I reimagined this process. I went over it again, a 3rd time, a 4th, a 5th. What was the result? That process was built automatically into my mind process. I had an ideal, a perfect image of myself, remembering to do the thing I wanted to do, built into the brain structure so that no matter how important were the things occupying my mind, I could go to the basement and return, not forgetting to turn out the light, not even being bothered to remember to turn them out. If your mind has been trained to idealize, if it has been trained for only a week or a month, you can idealize such a simple process 50 or 100 times in 5 minutes. That is, if your eyes are closed so that the mind is not interrupted by impressions of other things. Apply this idealized process not only to memory, but to the development of any mental process you wish to establish, any habit of character you wish to attain. After all, memory is a habit of character, and the process given here, idealized as I have described it, will change not only any mental process, but any habit of character, mental, ethical, or spiritual. The essential thing is to idealize the process, making it perfect in the mind, then it will always come true. Chapter 29. Changing weak wills to strong wills. What a tragedy is to live with a will so weak that one cannot carry out that which one sincerely intends to do, or live as one has consciously resolved to live. And it is so easy, so very easy, to change what is called a weak will to a strong will, if you idealize the process that was used in the beginning to form the original intention or resolution. If you do this, the original intention with all its desire is ever present and no effort is necessary to sustain the will. All success depends, however, upon the process being idealized, being made perfect in mind. In the case of will, the idealizing applies most of all to idealizing vivid images in the mind. Will is the power that makes us persist in our efforts to carry out a decision long after the decision is made. A person with a weak will often make a decision with the same good intention as one with a strong will, but the power to carry out their decision does not persist after the lapse of time because they cease to visualize the images that led them to make the decision in the first place. Why does a person of good intention, having made a promise in all sincerity, fail to keep it? Because of lack of will. Because they allow the images that led them to make the promise to become less vivid day by day. And as these images fade, as they become weaker and weaker, the individual leaves undone many things that should be done to enable them to keep the promise. A strong will keeps the images in mind day after day. A weak will permits them to fade. The decision at the time a promise is made is stronger because the images, ideas, and ideals that lead one to make the decision are vivid at the time. If the images are kept vivid, the decision remains and the will grows stronger instead of weaker. The case of a boy and his mother. The boy is lovable, dutiful, obliging, sociable, and idealistic, not a single bad habit. His mother is partly dependent upon him. He left the little Connecticut town to accept a position in New York City because the increased pay would make it possible for him to give more of this to his mother. Before leaving, he vowed to himself and promised her that every Saturday night he would send her at least $6, that when his salary was increased he'd send her more. Failure due to weak will. The $6 were sent the first, second, third, and fourth Saturday nights, but only $5 were sent the fifth, and then the amount varied. Finally, one Saturday night he had nothing to send. He did not even have enough to pay his room rent for the next week. He was just as lovable, obliging, and idealistic as when he left home. But when he went out with the other office men to lunch, he did not wish to seem miserly, so ordered what they ordered. When they invited him to join then, Dutch treated good theater, he went because he liked good entertainment. And so his money was spent. His habits were still good, but his will was not strong enough to resist the temptation to spend money for the things of the city. His struggle. The night he was unable to send anything at his mother was a night of agony. He was not selfish, and consequently he suffered the more. He prayed and he resolved and he vowed that he'd never fail again. But he did. Though he sent $6 a week regularly for the 4 succeeding weeks, the 7th week he sent but 4, and 2 of these he had borrowed. How he had developed a strong will. He chummed with a fellow worker in the office. One night the boy, in desperation, opened his heart to his friend, and the chum, who knew me, brought him to me. The boy felt his whole life would be a failure. If I have not strength of will to resist these temptations, what will become of me when big ones come? The process of idealizing. I asked him to close his eyes, to think of his home, to picture in his mind the house and the rooms in the house, to visualize his mother there, to visualize her love for him and his love for her, to visualize her needs and how much the $6 a week added to her comfort. That was all to it. You now feel strong enough to keep your promise, do you not? Well, certainly, he replied. I am strong enough now. Then always keep this condition of the now with you. Make it permanent in your mind. Visualize for 15 minutes every morning and every night these same images of your mother's home, her needs, and the extra comfort your $6 a week will provide. So long as these images are strong in your mind, your will to keep your promise is strong. But when these images fade and the image of expense, lunches, and theaters become stronger, your will to keep your promise becomes weak. To keep your will strong, to keep the promise you made, idealize the images which led you to make the promise. 24 hours later, he said over the telephone, "It's easy. Desire to help mother is so strong, I've not even a desire to waste money." And a year later he said the same thing, and he had lived up to it. Chapter 30. Normal Means of Attaining Spiritual Consciousness. The race longs for spiritual development. The soul desires it. You have long held ideas that you wish would come true. You have held ideas that do not relate to the daily life, that do not relate to business or politics or world affairs. Ideals that are an addition to those of your home, your family, your friends. In other words, ideals of your own spiritual consciousness. The desire to be at peace within yourself and at one with God. Spiritual consciousness completes life. It gives life the true balance, the balance of knowing both its actuality and its spirituality. Spiritual consciousness is a condition of being consciously in touch not only with all other souls, but with cosmic consciousness, with God, divine mind, the infinite, principle, anything you wish to name it. It is not recognition, nor acceptance, nor faith. It is not a thought of nor about God. It is consciousness, knowing God. Certainly I'd not write a word of how to attain spiritual consciousness if I thought you were looking for a means of attaining a sort of non-active state of etherealized super-holiness. The aim of all religion and idealistic thought is to extend the scope of life, to get in closer touch with and be more responsive to the infinite. This gives the keynote of the process by which we attain spiritual consciousness, making ourselves more responsive. Responsiveness necessitates likeness, for only like qualities or conditions respond one to another. The vibration of one string of a violin produces a responsive vibration only in a string or wire or vibrating body capable of vibrating to a like note. Even seemingly contrasting people are drawn to each other by those qualities of soul that are common, although perhaps unconsciously common. Intelligence of individuals differ much more than their love nature. The ignorant peasant knows love as deep and pure and noble as the best schoolman or woman in the world. Love is the great common denominator of man and God. Hence, consciousness of universal love is the first step in attainment of spiritual consciousness. But love's spiritual nature is not personal. Hence, the method must idealize it, eliminate personality, use the process that has been idealized in all the past for the three great unselfish manifestations of love. Love of home, love of country, and love of God. These have been most idealized before the fire, the hearth fire, the campfire, and the altar fire. No matter what the bickering of the day, the annoyance and disturbance, the disagreement, and perhaps even the quarrels, they all disappear when the family gathers about the open hearth fire. Little by little conversation ceases, which means that thought ceases and the vague consciousness of universal love permeates each, taking each in his reverie to the very borderland of spiritual consciousness. So also round the campfire of the army, no matter what the friction of the day between officers and men, or the discontent, or the horrors of the struggle, they disappear, and the same vague consciousness of universal love quiets the men and takes them also to the borderland. And the same is true perhaps to the greater extent before the altar fire. One cannot attain spiritual consciousness by thinking. Thinking is mind activity. The mind reaches out into all the world in search of new impressions and new ideas, to be taken within itself and treasured up for its own use. Its activity is toward the self, therefore selfish. Love is emotion. It is a moving out. Its nature is to give. Its activity is away from the self, therefore unselfish. Unselfishness is not attained by selfishness. Therefore, thinking, thought, or thought affirmation will not awaken a consciousness of universal love. Moreover, thinking, thought, and thought affirmation prevent the attainment of spiritual knowing, and establish instead thoughts about spiritual consciousness. The first step, then, is to quiet thought. The second, to awaken universal love by the most idealized process of all the ages, and that is idealization before the fire. You know the effects, whether before the open fire in the home or the campfire in the woods. First, you cease to think. Conversation lags and stops, and the body relaxes. Second, daily troubles vanish, and a kindly attitude and an indefinite contentment come to you. Third, there comes not a conscious, but a superconscious condition, beginning with reverie, and then all thought ceases. And since all thought has ceased, you are not even conscious that it has ceased, until fourth, with a start, you come back to yourself, that is, back to mental consciousness, but you have been on the borderland of spiritual consciousness. Continued, before the open fire, impersonally, the most idealized process of all times, the superconscious state soon becomes illuminated and spiritual consciousness is attained. Awakened in this way, it does not unfit one for the daily work of life. It becomes the balance, the proper balance of cosmic realization and practical life. End of chapter, end of book.